Okay, I think I'll get started since we're 6 minutes past, and I don't want us to delay any further. So let me just say, first of all, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry we're a little bit late in getting started. So I'm Naila Faroui. I'm the CEO of the Arab Foundations Forum. We are co-hosting this webinar, this panel today on the Arab philanthropic and civic sector response to the Syria-Turkey earthquakes in partnership with the International Medical Corps. So I just want to welcome you all to today's panel discussion. We're very pleased to co-host this with IMC to discuss the Arab philanthropic and civic sector response to the Syria and Turkey earthquakes earlier this year, which have left almost 50,000 people dead between the two countries. And of course, a huge humanitarian crisis with a rise in levels of homelessness, food insecurity, emergency medical needs, massive disruption in livelihoods of an already vulnerable population. So I'm not going to speak too much. I just wanted to give a quick kind of introduction to say, for the AFF, for the Arab Foundations Forum, this is a very important conversation for us to be co-hosting. We're always looking for ways to engage our network, to talk about the issues that are relevant to us in terms of our giving and in terms of how philanthropy can best support the issues that are relevant to our region. And so obviously this is an issue that is very pertinent and very critical for us to be having this conversation. We've brought together a panel of experts and people who are working on the ground to address this issue. And so you'll hear from each of them individually throughout the rest of this session. I'm going to introduce our moderator, who will also introduce the speakers, and then I'll hand it over to them so that they can have the chance to tell you a little bit more about the amazing work that they're doing. So our panel moderator is Yasmin Kayali. She's a social impact leader. She's the co-founder of Basma Zaytuna. Yasmin is a Syrian-Lebanese humanitarian. She co-founded the grassroots organization Basma Zaytuna in 2012 to serve Syrian refugees and their host communities across the Levant. Today, Basma Zaytuna is one of the largest refugee-led organizations in the world. They've supported over 1 million people in the region. And Yasmin was named a 2020 honoree by the Women's Refugee Commission and was given the Leaders for Peace Award in 2022. So while she was earning her master's degree in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School, Yasmin was also a fellow at the School Center for Public Leadership, as well as a Vital Voices Fellow, and she has served as president of the Harvard Arab Students Association. So Yasmin, welcome, and thank you so much for agreeing to moderate this incredibly interesting panel. I'll hand it over to you after just a quick update on our logistics. So we have a chat function as well as a Q&A function. So if you have any questions for any of the panelists, I urge you please to put those questions in the Q&A so that we can monitor them in real time and hand over the appropriate question to the appropriate panelist to respond to. If you put it in the chat, we'll probably find it, but it'll be better and easier for all of us if it's in the Q&A. So thank you so much. Enjoy. And Yasmin, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Naila, for this wonderful introduction. And thank you for having me as a moderator. This subject specifically is very close to my heart, being from Aleppo, Syria, and somebody who was very involved in the response to the earthquake and felt the impact of the earthquake in both Syria and Turkey. This means a lot to me, and it means a lot to me to continue to speak about the earthquake. It brings me very great pleasure to introduce our panelists today, who, as you mentioned, Naila, are people who are change makers on the ground and people who have had a great impact in the response. I'm going to start with Fadi Al-Dairi. Fadi is the co-founder and country director of Hand in Hand for Aid and Development. He left a career in banking in the UK to help with leading and establishing the organization of Hand in Hand, an organization that was founded in response to the commencement of the Syrian conflict in 2011. Hand in Hand now employs around 1,300 people in offices in the UK, Turkey, Syria, and Yemen. Fadi represents Hand in Hand on the steering committee of the NGO Forum, the advisory board for Scan UK, and the advisory board for DEMAC. He also represents the Northwest Syria NGO Forum at the Humanitarian Liaison Group. Obviously, a great expert on the ground in what we are talking about today. Next is Wafa Sadiq. Wafa is the country director in Syria of International Medical Corps. She joined the Global Humanitarian Organization as Deputy Country Director for Syria in 2015 and took on her current role in 2018. Sadia has nearly 20 years of experience in the humanitarian and development sectors, including non-profit management as country director. She oversees programming in Syria, including emergency response, health, mental health, psychosocial support and protection, water and sanitation, and hygiene programs. When massive earthquakes devastated Syria in February 2023, Sadia led International Medical Corps' emergency response, working with governorate in the affected areas, and was able to deliver medicines, medical supplies within 48 hours for the acute catastrophe, and managing recovery efforts. She was previously head of mission with Islamic France in Syria, and she worked with Islamic Relief for nearly a decade. Sadia has a BA in International Relations and Media Production from the University of Lincoln in the UK. Next, we have Firdaus Ogov. He's the Emergency Response Team Lead in Turkey for International Medical Corps. He has been working with the Global Humanitarian Organization for more than 2 decades now, most recently as the Roving Country Director in the Middle East. In his current role, he leads emergency response in the region and works with local partners to provide emergency medical care, mental health and social support, and protection services to people in need. Previously, he worked in Afghanistan with Chemonics International and Mercy Corps, overseeing implementation of development projects for more than 2 years. He has also worked with other agencies in East Africa and Central Asia for several years in various capacities. He holds an MA in conflict resolution from the University of Bradford, UK. And last but not least is Erdem Ayçiçek. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. He's the head of programs for MSYD ASRA. He holds a PhD doctoral degree in the Institute of Social Sciences, and he graduated from Gazi University. He has worked in different national NGOs as a researcher, mobilizer assistant, monitoring and evaluation assistant, M&E officer, project manager between the years of 2012 to 2016. He is one of the founders of MSYD as of 2015. He has published various academic articles and reports in national and international academic journals and edited books in the fields of forced migration, climate change, bureaucracy, and Turkish modernization. Erdem has participated in several national and international conferences and workshops on intercultural dialogue in Poland, Compendium on Good and Innovative Practices in the regional response to the Syria and Iraq crises, in Jordan, and disaster management in the Middle East technical universities. I think whatever I say about our panelists, it doesn't do them justice. But what I can say definitely, as somebody who's very in touch with what's going on, is that in the aftermath of the Syria-Turkey earthquakes, the significance of civic society and philanthropy and the response efforts cannot ever be overstated. As the communities grappled with the devastation and the urgent needs, the civic organizations and philanthropic initiatives had to step up to provide critical aid, support, and resources beyond just saving people from under the rubble. Their nimble and localized approach, combined with the deep understanding of the affected areas, allowed them to quickly mobilize assistance, offer essential services, and help the process of rebuilding the lives that were shattered, unfortunately. This collaborative and compassionate response from our panelists and others within this sector needs to be highlighted. Their indispensable role in addressing the immediate and long-term challenges by this natural disaster also needs to be put on the table as we listen to them and their expertise and understand better what's going on the ground and what's next. I want to start first with my first question to Wafa. Wafa, please, can you explain to us more about the situation today on the ground, where we were before, where we are today on the ground in Syria, and what the challenges have mostly been for you?
Well, I mean, there is no need. Obviously, everybody knows about the earthquake, how bad it affected the whole area. When it hit, obviously, South Turkey and north of Syria, thousands of families have lost their homes, they lost everything. Most of us, I mean, I'm now talking about most of the INGO, we try to work day and night, I mean, round the clock, trying to support whatever we can. From IMC perspective, we were able to deliver medication, medical consumable, kits for the cholera, although it was a little bit not the timing because it was freezing cold, and this is what made actually the situation much worse. But we were able to deliver everything within 48 hours. That's including the logistic, which usually takes a long time. But the situation was very, very devastating, very, very bad. The first few, I mean, let's say, not even after, I mean, we in Syria, northern Syria, there were no rescue team. I mean, the country has been under a war for the last 12 years, as you know. The infrastructure completely destroyed. There is no, the health facilities as well, the earthquake made it obviously worse. It hit more public facility, it hit schools, it hits almost, as I said, the infrastructure in the country. So basically we were trying to support whatever we can. All INGO, I mean, we even, it's not our probably speciality of like sort of even delivering food or hygiene or stuff like that, but we were actually doing it because of the needs. The situation now is still very bad. It's still actually, the needs is very, very high. The funding was actually much less with the earthquake. We did receive a lot of funds, but all of them are very, very tiny, very small in response of the earthquake. And some of them we have like sort of, because of the sanction, let's say the unilateral coercive measures on Syria, this actually affected our as well funding quite a lot. We were trying as well to support the public health because, as you know, the people will go to the public health and this belongs to the government. And this situation actually was a little bit difficult for us to try to persuade the donors that this is what is really most needed. Although IMC does have its own primary health care and they do have their own mobile team, but it is, I mean, for areas, not like when you do that for the public facilities. In IMC, we were able, as I said, delivering all these 3 trucks to the 3 governorates in Aleppo, Hama, and Latakia. And after that, we deployed an emergency team, medical mobile team, who's got as well MHBSS as well as actually supporting the child protection and with hygiene kit as well and dignity kit. And this is actually will go for rotating between the 3 governorates. So, I mean, we were able to do that, but as I mentioned, the needs is extremely high. And I mean, I don't know how to cover the gaps, but basically we are trying to support like sort of, let's say, one of the hospitals in Aleppo, where I visited as well myself, and the WHO rep as well visited that, where unfortunately the situation is extremely bad. The equipment they don't have for the emergency, they don't have anything. And the CT scan I've seen, and I said that many times, it's actually not even fit to put it in a museum. It's really, really bad. So this is the situation. It's still in a much needs. Whatever we do, we really need to keep supporting these people because the people are extremely suffering in that situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Wafa, for that introduction. I'd like to move to Fadi and get an overview of your work and what you have done and your intervention and your perspective on the situation.
Thank you so much, Yasmin, and to Wafa for setting the scene. It has been really challenging. I mean, this is the first time where the first responders are actually need support. I mean, of course, it wasn't easy with our teams being mobile and living in their cars, but at the same time, they still have to respond. I think with the structure we have, we relied on our field team inside Syria. We're quite fortunate as a British foundation to have continuous supplies from the UK, and then pre-positioned supplies, as in unrestricted supplies, sitting in our warehouses. So we were able to deploy some of these. We're also quite fortunate to have some private funding. However, when it came to private funding, there were only limited supplies inside Syria to buy. But our main focus was on delivering of emergency food ration, cooked meals, blankets, and emergency shelter. There was literally, this is the first time we deal with a disaster. In Turkey, they have they keep having drills on the air, mainly to do with the emergency supplies.
I'm sorry, Fadi, I think you broke up while you were describing the difference between Syria and Turkey. If you could repeat that part.
Yes, sorry, I'm in hotel accommodation in Brussels. The internet is unstable. When dealing with the earthquake, our guys in the field, they don't have the experience. Yes, we do have experience on how to avoid or respond to attacks from certain military groups, from the government of Syria or anyone. But we never had the training on how to deal with emergency, such as earthquake, where we are displaced. So this is the difference. Where in Turkey they had the training, but yeah, our experience is limited.
Thank you, Fadi. I appreciate that perspective. For those, please, if you can give us your perspective from your point of view and how things were for you.
Yeah, thank you, Yasmin, and thank you for the Arab Foundation Forum to provide this platform to actually discuss a little bit about this. For us, I'll cover the Turkey side. Basically, the situation has been very much the same as Wafa and can you hear me?
For those, we lost you for a little bit. You went on mute.
Yeah, sorry. It says my internet connection is weak, but yeah, I was saying that the situation was similar to what Wafa and Fadi have explained as well, and the devastation. It was something that we haven't really seen before. With as you know, in Turkey, the death toll is around 50,000 of overall in the different provinces that have been impacted. People, although initially they thought that it is only in Kahramanmaraş and Gaziantep area, where it has impacted several provinces, and nobody expected in such a big scale of disaster that is going to happen in this area. We had, for example, I think it's around 3 million people that have been displaced, according to the various reports that we've been receiving, and the displacement have been everywhere throughout Turkey. In compared to Syria, I think it has been a little bit more prepared for that in terms of population, but the scale of it has been so great that not every province could have been covered at the same time. Hatay, it actually used to be my home for almost 5 years, where I went there, and it is completely devastated. Erdem, my colleague here, will be providing more details, but what I've seen in there, it's a lot of people you talk to, and they say this is the Qiyamah that we've seen. People that have basically, even our ex-colleagues and friends who worked, who lived in this area, they said they took their families out. They can hear the screams of the people in the buildings, and what they the helplessness that they felt. It's terrible. However, quite a lot of people, including our partners, staff, have been impacted significantly, yet they've managed to come together. International Medical Corps actually managed to mobilize funding quickly, and we managed to be on the ground within a week time. After, with our response, we were actually there the second day already for our assessments, but within a week time, we managed to deliver a response through our partners in different areas of Turkey, providing initially, again, Erdem through MSYD, they've did a great job providing all the coordination services. A lot of humanitarian aid was coming to Hatay, but there were no coordination platforms where they've managed to mobilize and provide coordination for this response, as well as provide PFA, the psychosocial first aid services to all the impacted people. Again, the situation was something that we haven't really seen anywhere else. People were in the streets. It was very cold weather condition. People didn't have their warm clothing, no blankets. Water and sanitation was a major issue to deal with. People did not have actually food to eat, and everybody has been really, really scared, and the psychological impact of that has been great, and it is continuing. I remember being in Adana airport on the 20th of February, basically around 2 weeks after the initial earthquake, where the second earthquake happened, and people were running to all directions, not knowing where to actually go. So the impact is major, and it will continue. Thanks.
Thank you, Firdaus, for shedding light on the situation in Turkey. Erdem, can you give us more details about the situation in Turkey specifically from your perspective and your experience?
First of all, thank you very much, and thank you for the Firdaus specifically, because what we are doing for the survivors of the earthquake in Turkey, IMC has a special place for us to ensure the operational capacity. So it is clear that the earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria is one of the biggest natural disasters, and Adıyaman, Hatay, and Kahramanmaraş are the ones that mostly affected from the earthquake as a province base. And since the earthquake showed its devastating impact on the infrastructure and the state capacity, the regular and easy accessible governmental and mainstream service provision has been broken. And please imagine that everything you can see with your eyes being destroyed, and buildings, including the buildings in the side streets, in the places where the professional search and rescue teams could not reach, people try to save their family members, relatives by their own resources. And that's why we identified that there are high number of the people which is getting disability, physical disability on their bodies. So during this period in which that the normalities and routines has been damaged, it was identified by our field departments that children, elderly people, and persons with disabilities are the ones mostly affected from the earthquake in terms of the behavioral, psychological, emotional, and physical well-being. And also, please imagine that the more than 49% of the Syrian refugees in Turkey has been directly affected from the earthquake. It means that roughly half of the Syrian refugees in Turkey. And when we look at the host community side, it means that 1 out of the 6, each 6 citizens has been directly impacted from the earthquake in a negative way. and there was a really massive internal secondary movement from the earthquake hit region to the other provinces of Turkey. And during this process, with IMC support and with our other international community partners, we were able to provide a massive distribution of the food baskets, basic needs materials, and specialized assistive devices for the persons with disabilities. We were able to cover the medical needs and surgery-related, healthcare-related cost of the refugees and host community members. And also, we have an accreditation by the Ministry of Family and Social Services. And through this accreditation, we were able to provide psychosocial support services, specifically for the survivors who are suffering from the acute stress disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. So, given the severity of the disaster, substantial needs are still unmet, even though roughly 4 million people has received assistance from the governmental or non-governmental actors. And there are significant requirements and needs spectrums for the women and girls, elderly and persons with disabilities in many places. So currently, when we look at the current dynamics, we can say that the government of Turkey has focused on establishing the formal settlement areas, such as tent and container cities. But vast majority of the survivors are living in the informal settlements. And as MSYD, our primary focus on the ones who are residing in the informal settlements, including the refugees, because unfortunately in such settlements, there are no regular authority to provide regular services like regular delivery of the hot meals, or there are lack of the sanitation capacities in that locations, informal catchments. That's why with IMC also, we were able to install more than 200 portable toilets, showers, and toilets for the persons with disabilities. Unfortunately, when we look at the government-run official accommodation centers, there are also lack of awareness on the persons with disabilities. There are lack of the enough spaces for them for their access to the wash facilities. We also try to support these places in terms of the complementarity as well as the other places. Thank you.
Thank you, Erdem, for providing us this perspective and this clarity with statistics on the impact of the earthquake. These numbers are very sobering. I believe for anybody who listens to them, even though a lot of us saw on TV or in the news or through social media what happened physically, but I think when you put humanity in perspective and the impact on 1 in 6 citizens of Turkey and half of the Syrian refugees that reside in Turkey, we see the gravity of the situation. And spanning from there, I'd like to go back to Wafa. And I'd like to ask you, Wafa, after we have done the initial emergency response, and now that it's been more than 100 days since the earthquakes, I want to ask you, what are the most pressing priorities and current gaps that you see from your experience on the ground? And what are some of the key challenges that organizations such as yours are facing in responding to the earthquake? And how have these challenges evolved over time?
I mean, to be quite honest, the priorities are immense. Yeah, I mean, it is from all aspects. And sometimes we've been asked to prioritize it. You can't really prioritize with a country who's been devastated for the last 13 years, where there's no water, there is no electricity, there is no fuel, there is nothing. And then the earthquake came on top of it and people have lost complete any hope they had. But I mean, I would say from what our experience as IMC in Syria, the health facilities are completely destroyed. Most of them. I mean, we are now doing like sort of study on it. So to see the public health facilities, how many of them have been destroyed before and after. And what we really need is to do a proper needs assessment of all the sectors. This is a very, very, very important. So, I mean, the health facilities, as I mentioned, we really need to support. We really need to make sure that the people of Syria, they have access to health facilities, they have access to to clean water, they have access to like sort of food. Basically, the impact of the earthquake was very, very dire, basically. And this is, I think, what we really need to do. We really need to provide medical equipment. We really need to provide like a small rehabilitation for like sort of even schools, for almost everything, especially for the wash. I mean, at the moment now, I mean, the weather is getting very hot. And let's, I mean, not forget that before the earthquake last summer, we started getting cholera. And the cholera, this is a waterborne disease. And this is, again, it will start now, and with other probably waterborne diseases, which is probably typhoid. And from as well our experience from our facilities, we have seen as well something rising at the moment, which is meningitis, which is actually very serious as well. So this is really very, very important. So I would say probably needs assessment from all the INGO on the grounds to make sure that to record what we really need on the ground. The challenges, I mean, since the earthquake, I mean, we used to have many challenges, especially with the sanctions. But since we had MOU with the Ministry of Health, we had MOU with the Ministry of Local Administration, Ministry of Social Affairs, we are able to like sort of communicate much quicker, much faster. But as I mentioned before, again, the sanctions can be a little bit difficult for us, a challenge. Caesar Act, but since the earthquake, some of these sanctions have been lifted. We're having problem with bank de-risking. Some of the organization almost closed because they weren't allowed or they weren't able to get the funding to Syria. This is over compliance, but I mean, this is again, it's a challenge for INGO working under the government area. So but what we are doing mitigation. We have a good relationship with the ministries. We are trying actually to reach all the needed population, probably the rural area, and we are getting access. We are getting it much better than we used to get it before. Visas for expats were receiving in a much quicker way than before, again, and we are able to deliver. But the challenges are huge, basically. The challenges from all sides, not able, I mean, we were trying as well with the UN agencies to support the Northwest area because we were able to like sort of with the UN obviously and SARC, but this was a little bit challenging as well because as far as I know, they were actually waiting for 3 days, but they weren't allowed to get into Idlib. This is, again, this is some challenges. I mean, people, they really need to think about the humanitarian aspect, not about political aspect, because we are here supporting the population. We're not supporting any political issue or anything. So this is, I think, very, very important as well. So, yeah, I mean, IMC, as I said, trying their best, and we are now, as I said, rotating with a medical mobile team, and we are doing the assessment at that time, at the same time. So we are supporting whatever we can to do as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Wafa, for that. And I really hope that everybody hears your call for a needs assessment, because for us all to be able to be impactful and not double the work and unfortunately, I don't want to use the word misuse, because as you said, the needs are immense, and wherever you put your funding behind, there's a need for that. But maybe we need to come together and all prioritize what the most imminent needs are. Fadi, I turn to you now, and based from your knowledge on the ground, what do you see as the most pressing priorities and current gaps? And if you can shed light on how can Arab philanthropic and civic sector respond to this, and how can we guide them to help us in this impact that we're trying to make?
Thank you, Yasmin. I mean, I think with our priorities in Northwest Syria, they're similar to Erdem. I mean, as they say, as he said, we have issues responding to persons with disability. We have issues meeting the needs of women on the ground. When it comes to the children as well, again, the needs of children. We also look at the long-term solution. I'm here in Brussels attending the Brussels Conference 7 on Syria, which is after 12 years. And so far, this is the first time we talk about early recovery. And well, are we ready for early recovery or still emergency response? We're still recovering from the earthquake. We still need to maybe remove the rubble. And before removing the rubble, we need to find somewhere for people to live in. And I think this would take us to the next point, Yasmin, where he said, what can the Arab philanthropists maybe do, or Arab donors? We always aim and look for the traditional donors, the likes of BHA and FCDO for funding. And I think it's about time we should go and look for the non-traditional one or the non-humanitarian donors. And then in particular, we go for the Arab philanthropist. Let me put my hat as the NGO Forum chairperson. There are some amazing local networks, local NGOs. I keep meeting them and have exposure to their programs. Some of them, they're worth exploring. Sorry, a lot of them, I would say, worth exploring some of the projects. They have amazing ideas, and they can only be funded by a philanthropist, by somebody who's, I mean, who think alike. We need to have a link between the local NGOs and the philanthropist. When it comes to localization, so far we've not seen any localization by the traditional donor looking at funding local ones. And this is the chance where the Arab philanthropist and the Arab donors should give the chance to the local NGOs and ask them to implement. We see solutions for the early marriage. And this is what I keep saying. Yes, we need to tackle early marriage, but we need to tackle it smartly and taking into consideration the normal cultures and values in the field. We can't just change it overnight or with a 6-month project. This has to be over 10 years of time. For example, again, we have a project where we were responding to persons with disability. And then all of a sudden we realized, oh, we only treat men. And what's the problem here? We realize there are females who have disability as well. It's not only men. But they're not coming because they are exposing themselves to male in the treatment center. So now what we thought is, okay, we're gonna train females to be able to respond to females themselves, so we preserve their dignity. So these sort of things, they can only be funded by a non-traditional donor or Arab philanthropist. I hope I captured your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Fadi. I really appreciate that. And yes, like you're saying, a lot of organizations are always, especially in the Levant, are always dependent on the traditional donors, on the traditional program funding, and calls for program proposals, rather than going into a different route, especially after, you're saying, 12 years of our experience with Syria. And our growing knowledge of trying to find funding for the different programs that we have on the ground. I want to turn to Firdaus, and I want to ask you, Firdaus, from your experience and from your work in different regions in the world, and as you shed light on the current situation in Turkey and in Syria, how do you feel that philanthropy can empower local CSOs to rebuild Syria and Turkey in a manner that enforces localization, which is now the current trend with INGOs that we're trying to actually bring to life? You're on mute, Firdaus.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, it takes a little bit of time. Yeah, how can the philanthropists, I mean, I think what Fadi mentioned now is looking in the coordination, existing coordination system already available, and trying to complement the efforts that have been already put in place is a very important thing. For example, for us as International Medical Corps, we do invest a lot in our local partners. When we come into a place, we do check the capacity and we try to see where we invest and how do we build the capacity to ensure that the local organizations that are there, they're able to deliver assistance. I would proudly say MSYD is one of them. For example, we've worked with the organization with so many, several years building the administrative operational capacity as well as technical capacity. And today, after the earthquake, now they are independently able to deliver mental health and psychosocial services, physical therapy and rehabilitation, and other partners of us who are delivering primary health care through mobile units. So I think coming into place and assessing the needs, not only the needs of the beneficiaries, but also the needs of the organizations delivering the aid, and how do the philanthropists or the international agencies can contribute to build the capacity of the local organizations to ensure that for longer term, they are able to deliver the services that are needed by the impacted population. As both Erdem and Fadi mentioned, currently after the earthquake, there's a huge need for physical rehabilitation services, and we have several partners now in Turkey who are actually delivering primary healthcare as well as physical therapy and rehabilitation services, which is very important. So coming into place, the philanthropists definitely come and see what are the coordinations mechanisms available, and trying to inject their efforts into those systems would significantly help the response. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think what we were trying to shed a lot of light on is the long-term rebuilding of, like Erdem was saying, that a lot of people are not in the official set up spaces for people, which makes it even more difficult for them to receive services, more difficult for M&E, more difficult for any kinds of need assessment. But also what I wanted to ask Erdem specifically is, how do you see that the protracted crisis and tension in the region has affected the response, be it on the ground and also with different philanthropists in the region, how that has impacted the reach into any kind of funding?
Yeah, actually, thank you very much. When it comes to the main challenges that we face during the emergency response, actually, we might mention regarding the lack of enough coordination mechanisms in the provinces, because yes, the government of Turkey tried to their best with their provincial directorates, but at the same time there are too many authorization changes, too many position changes, and the lack of enough coordination mechanism at the local and central level. So it also block local NGOs to provide more comprehensive services in the earthquake hit regions. Apart from this, yes, unfortunately, traditional funding process requires some bureaucratic steps. So it is also another issue, because we are responsible of what we are witnessing at the field, and we are trying to work day and night with our limited capacity. At the same time, we are trying to, reach out to international community members through their official call for proposals and convince them to regarding the needs of the specific survivors. So that's why it is really a hard process to manage spontaneously. And in addition to this, one of the other challenge point for us that regarding to some legal framework in Turkey, because unfortunately some law structure or legal framework in Turkey is not able to adjust itself to the needs of the emergency situation. So that's why we are trying to make some advocacy efforts through the highest level representatives from the government of Turkey, because in order to provide similar services for refugees and Turkish citizens, we need to get approval from the respective authorities in the government of Turkey. But when we look at the application and assessment process, there are some invalid regulatory framework, and it also blocks some NGOs to provide specialized services. And in addition to this, in line with the widespread and deepening needs of the earthquake survivors, normally survivors has sharing high expectations for the NGOs to meet their all needs. It is also one of the other tension factor at the field level. We are trying to provide information, respective information on available services in the locations from both governmental and non-governmental side, but it was also hard to manage process. And in addition to this, we have just completed our need assessment reports for the survivors of the earthquake, and when we'll try to understand of their subjective protection feeling, when we ask and address some questions regarding their feelings, safety feelings, we observe that more than half of the survivors from citizens and refugee communities has not feeling safe while they are their children playing in the street, while they are walking in the street at night, or while any kind of witness any issue of the violence in their daily lives. So it means that we need to more invest on their physical and mental well-being of the in the specific areas. So this is the main issues actually we want to add.
Thank you, Adam. So definitely advocacy for psychosocial support, integration into any kind of programming or intervention that is done not only in the earthquake impacted areas, but in the areas of conflict in Syria are, I think, integral in any kind of programming that is done. Fadi, I want to ask you, especially on the back of the fact that you're today in the Brussels conference, what do you feel are the lessons learned from a 10-year plus protracted Syrian refugee crisis that can help us with the response to the earthquake and to the crisis in general?
Well, I will try and summarize, yes. But in terms of like lessons from the protracted crisis, I think the solution is local, in my view. Like the immigrants, I think the local NGOs, they learned a lot from their partnership with the international NGOs. Like what Firdaus mentioned earlier, the philanthropists, it would be good if they can invest. Last 10 years, we've seen local NGOs flourishing and making great progress since from the day they started, I would say. I would say again, I mean, we should look at maybe building the resilience and the peace amongst the people. Maybe there should be like an incentive, in my view. But after all, we should also invest in the, let's say, the private industry. In my view, we should look at maybe we created. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, I think we made the people fully dependent on humanitarian assistance, and now it's going to be challenging to wean them off. When we have displaced people from different areas, from Damascus, from Aleppo, from Homs, and they were all being displaced in the northern parts. Now we try and say, okay, we have a dilemma. We need to provide them with a dignified time. They have the right to go home. How can we reach like a compromise where they say they need to go back to Damascus and they should go back to Daraa, but the environment is not right at the moment. Yeah. So what do we do? Do we talk about peace? Do we talk about justice, accountability, various things? So it's a bit of mix of both, but for me, I think we should stop or wean people of humanitarian assistance into long-term solution. Like resilience program. Thank you.
Thank you, Fadi, for that. Actually, that was my next question, Naila, about the. I actually wanted to ask both Wafa and Firdaus at the same time. What about the Arab philanthropic sector and all what the Arab donors did in response to this crisis? How have their contributions been significant in your experience? The fundraising efforts and collaborations with them, how has it been effective, not effective? What are the lessons learned specifically from Arab donors and the Arab philanthropic sector? Wafa, if we can start with you and then move to Firdaus.
Yeah. Obviously, after the earthquake, I mean, not as INGO, I'm talking now about as a whole. Syria has received a lot of support from the Arab countries, from the UAE. And we learned later that the UAE as well, because they were actually at the very beginning, they were sending almost 10 planes with support to Damascus, to Aleppo, and they were able to support in that. But I mean, not to INGO themselves, but this was with a team from the Red Crescent in the UAE, as well as with the Red Crescent, the Syrian Arab Red Crescent. So they were both working together and trying to support all the beneficiaries and support of the people. But I really would like, I mean, to see some support coming to the INGO, because at the end of the day, we are on the ground and we've done as well the needs assessment, and we are doing as well, we are trying our best as well to try to deliver the services and whatever they need. And at the same time, having fund from like, as mentioned by Fadi and other colleagues, from the what we already had, you know, from the like BHA, CDO, and the current donors, it's okay. But with the Arab as well, it will be as well, will do great impact as well in the region. Especially as Arab countries, they know the culture, they know the people, they know the need, they know the language, they can come and they can see what is been happening on the ground. Which is very important. And at the same time, I would like to draw the attention of the donors, if there are any of them here, that when you get fund for only 1 year, and then suddenly you have to cut, it is very, very difficult. So if it is possible to have multi-year funding, that actually will make a lot of difference for our program, because then we will have continuation. And especially here, I'm talking about MHPSS. I mean, having said that, I came, to Syria, I came back in 2014, at the beginning of 2014. And being here and working with the beneficiaries, I think we all need therapy. We all need therapy from the stress and what we are seeing. So if we are sitting in much better environment and that we are in a comfortable zone, as we say, as INGO, and we really need the therapy. How about those people who really need the support so much? I mean, I don't want to even remember what is being said in Aleppo from one guy. It was very, 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 very sad message when the team went up and he lost everyone. And I would love to share it with you. And what he actually, when somebody asks him, is there anything we can do and what we can like sort of take messages from you? The thing he said, even up till now, when I remember what he said, it really, really makes me, I mean, there's no word which actually can explain this, but he said, if somebody asks you about the Syrian people, just tell them that the people who survived died and the people who died survived. So, I mean, this is a very, very, very difficult message, I mean, to receive. So, yeah, I mean, there is a lot of rebuilding in the country. As I said, it was the cherry on the top of the cake, the earthquake. The people have lost homes. Some of them have been displaced not once, not twice, maybe many times. The mental health is our top priority at the moment, and we are trying to support whoever we can. Recently, we've got the Women and Girls Safe Space, where we have again a medical mobile team who's going there and to try to identify, because of the culture, you can't tell them that you need therapy. So you really need to like sort of, the stigma is very, very bad. As Arab, I'm sure you know what it is like. So when you have the medical mobile team there and the doctor can identify, they can open up in the Women and Girls Safe Space. But it is very dire, very dire and very, very difficult situation at the moment. And God knows when this will end, but let's hope and try to work together to find a solution and try to support whatever we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Wafa. And I really hope that your call for support will reach a lot of the Arab philanthropists and development funds that are involved with the forum. And I want to ask the same of Firdaus. How has your experience been with the Arab foundations and other funding mechanisms that were used in the response to the earthquake? How effective were they? Are there lessons learned from that experience that we can take forward?
Thank you, Yasmin. I mean, you probably know there were almost 94 different countries that have responded to Turkey. Turkey has been more fortunate in compared to Syria, what the colleagues have highlighted. And significant number of those responders were from the Arab countries, and most of that came from the government, and a bilateral funding as well as aid has been provided by the Arab countries directly through the Turkish government, through the Turkish Red Crescent and other response mechanisms that are there. When it comes to philanthropists, we haven't really, the information is not as much as widely available, what kind of support has been provided by different individuals or foundations into Turkey. But what I can mention specifically for us, for International Medical Corps, we're currently working in a discussion with Al-Walid philanthropist from Saudi Arabia, where we have been in discussion on implementing physical rehabilitation and MHPSS services, the mental health and psychosocial services in Turkey through our partnerships with MSYD. And hopefully that's going to start very soon. And as the colleagues mentioned, the needs are very, very high here. And I think the more investment, more response will be definitely welcomed and required for the longer term response here. But yeah, that's where we stand at the moment with one of the philanthropists from the Arab countries. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think definitely a lot of learning in alternative tracks of funding other than typical ODA and calls for grant that are usually used, especially with Arab philanthropists, large philanthropic funds that are being set up or have been set up for quite some time. My final question to Fadia and Erdem, as you are working on the ground with maybe more grassroots approach, how can we skew the funding? We did a lot of emergency relief, giving out food, etc. But how can we now skew the funding away from that, even though there's still a need? But in the end, if we want to create a community that is living in dignity, that is more empowered, that is more capable of being able to take agency, then we need to help them rebuild their lives by rebuilding their homes, rebuilding small businesses, etc. How can we skew the funding from what currently concerns most people in giving food or supplying tents or whatever into more pragmatic interventions that are skewed towards rebuilding?
Do you want to go first, Yasmin? Or okay. Well, I think the best way is just to empower the community. I mean, by injecting more cash into the livelihood, this way you would empower the whole community. We need to wean Syrians off humanitarian assistance. We need to be self-reliant. We need to be self-resistant, self-resilient. If I look back at Syria 12 years ago or 13 years ago, we used to export wheat into Italy. Yeah, we used to be. I think we had zero foreign debt, as far as I know. I think years ago. I'm not saying thanks to the government, but I mean it's a system. It worked at the time. People would have 2 jobs or 3 jobs, but I think they would have zero debt as individuals. We need to go back to that stage. Yeah, but to do so, we need to inject cash with community, and it's a dream for everyone now to have a job with the humanitarians. As a humanitarian, it's like, okay, it's not a dream. I mean, we should stop our operation, and we should move them into providing job opportunities for others. I know the livelihood is one of the options, and agriculture is another. But there are, if you look at Aleppo was the capital of Syria when it comes to the industry, to the manufacturing. And now where is Aleppo? There are 700 factories, non-operational, and that's due to many other issues. Again, Damascus was the trade capital, I would say. There's always competition between Damascus and Aleppo. But I come from Daraa anyway, so it's the agriculture side. Where is Damascus on the trade, with the trade? It's gone. We need to get them back because they provide the job opportunities for the ordinary civilians in the streets. And that's the only way we can have a long-term solution, not us as a humanitarian intervening, but we should be used, and we should be the facilitation. We should have the facilitation for it. Thank you, Yasmin.
I have to chime in here. I'm a very proud Aleppian, daughter of an industrialist who lost all his factories. I have to say, I don't see the way back for industry anytime soon. Reinvesting in a Syria that continues to not be secure, not monetarily and financially, and not security-wise. I don't know if any of the industrialists are looking to come back. It's very, very unfortunate. But yeah, I think a lot more advocacy needs to be done on that part. And I think, yes, Arab philanthropists and Arab civic societies needs to be involved in this conversation for us to take it forward. In the end, we are a part of the Arab League, and everybody benefits from a successful Syria. Erdem, for you in Turkey, how do you see also the aid moving beyond the government aid, of course, the international aid, and more specifically the Arab aid, moving more into rebuilding rather than, instant humanitarian relief?
Yeah, actually, thank you for the question, because at the end of the emergency response, we have to talk about the early recovery and normalization for all survivors. So when we look at the main sign of the normalization process in the provinces, actually we need to fix the production and business life in the city. So we try to make some early recovery and development programs for the survivors to make them more active and productive agent of the community. In this sense, skill upgrading trainings, minor shelter or business place, job place, rehabilitation services, and job replacement services need to be more invested by the future term programs. So because at the same time, till now we had implemented some pilot program, for example, for the minor rehabilitation of the green housing in Hatay province of Turkey. And the outcomes are very satisfying for us to see, because it is really after the rehabilitation phase completed, the owner of the green housing has started to produce their materials and try to sell in the local market. So while designing such kind of livelihood specific programs, also we have to take into consideration the local market dynamics. So that's why we are in Kahramanmaraş or in Hatay, we are trying to make similar support in specific and different subsectors. So I think this is one of the important base for us to think more about it. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. These are very, very valuable programs, really, and everybody needs to learn from your experience and your impact. And I hope that you're documenting and measuring that. And I think this is the best way forward, that we share these learnings with donors in order for them to support the expansion of these programs and their impact. I want to thank our panelists for their answers and their transparency with us, and sharing these stories from the ground with us, and start our Q&A. We actually have a question that came via email for somebody who signed up but unfortunately couldn't join us, and I'd like to read that question. And actually it's directed at all of you. Hello, I am Ghufran Abu Daye, the MENA chapters coordinator at Catalyst 2030. We are currently working on building chapters in both Syria and Turkey for the long-term response to the earthquake, and have been searching for sustainable resources for funding the social enterprises with innovative solutions to implement them, specifically in Syria, to build a strong infrastructure towards a model that the world can learn from. Considering the political ecosystem, it is really hard to find private sector partners that are interested in investing in Syria. What are our options for sustainable, long-term, autonomous, and supporting innovation funding in the region? I think this question, if anybody can answer it for her or shed light on it, I think everybody would benefit from such learning and such resources. Fadi?
Maybe I can just jump on this. It's very much the same what you have answered to Fadi question in terms of who is going to come and how they're going to build. And as a daughter of industrial person, you know, what your answer was is basically it is very hard to bring investors in a situation where there's no stability at the moment, and maybe it is more convenient to do it in the government area, which is again sanctioned area, and there is all these complexities around it, which makes it more difficult for even an entrepreneur to come and try to invest in those places. But it is a very complicated question indeed, but I'll leave it to Fadi.
Thank you for those for pushing, and I'm glad you turned back onto Yasmin, because I also would like to hear her opinion on it. it is challenging. I mean, if I'm talking about the northwest Syria, then we have some designated armed groups, yeah, especially, you know, they could be of the terrorist group. And how would we invest? And who's going to be investing some funds? How do you screen people in when we don't have identity cards? We have so many challenges, and it's only like a long-term solution would come in. It's in the same way when I see the division between the social groups from Damascus. I mean, you see videos of people in flashy cars, top of the range. You see how people living the dream, and then others are, you know, struggling to survive on an hourly basis. I'm not sure if I have a solution. Honestly, I don't have an answer. Thank you. Maybe someone else. So, Wafa, go on.
I would actually, I mean, I will agree with everyone, to be quite honest. It is very difficult. Being in the government area, I've actually experienced the challenges firsthand, especially the sanctions. And obviously, as mentioned by Fadi now as well, I mean, the people are suffering quite a lot. There are obviously not many group of people who are, yes, using cars, flashy cars, and they don't probably even feel what's been happening. But again, as I mentioned earlier, even us, where we actually, as what we call, you know, we are on a better level than many people, unfortunately, we are suffering. Everybody is suffering in Syria. And if you don't mind, Yasmin, I just want to actually mention something which I forgot earlier regarding the Arabs, where actually most of the Arabs, even the Arabs who doesn't even have the capacity, they actually tried to support Syria in the earthquake. And the same as Firdaus mentioned, Al-Walid's actually foundation, they are at the moment, they are trying to support us. But I don't want to lose hope. I know, I mean, you've said, unfortunately, this is what happened in Aleppo and the destruction, all of that. But if you go back to history, Syria, Aleppo, Damascus have been destroyed in the history, in the many times, and it rose again. So I would like to keep the hope going, and especially now for the last 12 years, we lost so many generations. I mean, how many children are on the street? How many children are out of school? And Syria was one of the best, I mean, in the past, like sort of education-wise. Even when we had the cholera last year, it was very difficult to find people who understand, you know, what cholera is, because they haven't seen it for a very long time. So things, unfortunately, had turned down, turned really like sort of very bad. And if you know, I mean, Syria as well was a hub of refugees in the past. And I mean, it used to deliver people from all over the world, even not only from Arab countries. And if you as well see WHO, the health in Syria was amazing. But I mean, unfortunately, this is what happened. We really need to like sort of try to be positive as much as we can and keep the hopes, our hope, very high. Unfortunately, as I said, we are in a situation where maybe it is very difficult to think about hope at the moment, but this is the only probably way forward for us. But regarding you know, the funding, it is extremely complicated and very difficult. It's the most complex, politicized issue in the whole world, I think, because the politics is very big part of the situation in Syria. I mean, one of the things, like if the donor will tell you, I am not going to allow my fund to rebuild any building which has been hit by, let's say, the government. But now the earthquake happened. How are we going to differentiate between the earthquake and the other buildings? So it is really, I mean, very complex. It is very difficult, very challenging. And I can't see, to be quite honest, unless these political issues stops and we think more about the humanitarian issue. Otherwise, I can't see a way out of this, unfortunately. It's very challenging, extremely challenging. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I just want to clarify something. I am a very, very stark believer in Syria, and I have immense hope for Syria and its people. Actually, the silver lining of what has happened to us is that we have amazing ambassadors all over the world, an amazing civic society that has developed and that has been able to intervene on a humanitarian and development and relief level. That is the work of countries and governments, but we have done it as individuals and as a grassroots civil society in collaboration with amazing INGOs. And we will rebuild Syria, and we will bring back our people, and it will be wonderful because the spirit and the resilience that we have is unprecedented. And I am sure it's coming around. And that is why I would like all Arab philanthropists and this forum to reinvest in Syria and its people who have come and worked in their countries, and they have seen their work ethic and their hard work and their ability to develop. So hopefully it will happen and it will come around. I think we are running quite short on time. If each of you can, one, give us a closing remark, I would really appreciate it. And also if you can share a link for direct donations that people can make to each of your organizations. Several people have asked, and we can have it here on recording, and then we can share it in text with the recording when it is launched. If we can start with Wafa and then Fadi and then Firdaus and then Erdem, just closing remarks by each of you, I would really appreciate it.
I mean, I just want to thank you so much for this, and I want to thank the donors as well for their support. We've been working in Syria since 2008, obviously with the Iraqi first, then the Syrian, and I mean, the support has been immense as well recently from the ground, from the donors, from our colleagues everywhere. That said, and we have, as I said, we have to stay positive, and we are sort of thinking about that and trying to do our best in the country to support all the beneficiaries. And as you said, hopefully we will get the philanthropists as well on our side and getting more funds to be able to support. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, following on from Wafa's comments and from both of you being positive, I have to remain positive as well. I think we remain in hope. We live in hope. And then again, from the Nile as a question, you know, have we seen any Arab philanthropist funding? This is a highly politicized humanitarian response. This is where the humanitarian response is we've been told like, okay, we only fund government-controlled area, or we only fund Northwest, we don't fund government-controlled. And I think the philanthropists are being scared off. And I just say my key message is, don't be scared off with politics. There are humanitarian needs in the field to be met. This is my message. Thank you. And thank you, Yasmin, for facilitation.
Yeah, similar to the messages of my colleagues, I think it is important not to forget this area. Definitely, Syria is in a huge need of international assistance, as well as Turkey, so we should not leave it. And while the institutional donors have been doing great, I think we need more regional investment as well into the region. So definitely, please do engage, do understand what is happening in the context and deliver the aid to the people, that millions basically. Only in Turkey, it's 3 million displaced people, whereas in northern Syria, as far as I remember, the latest is more than 4.5 million people in need. So the international community and the Arab philanthropists, contribution will be highly appreciated. Thank you, Yasmin, and thank you everybody else for organizing this session.
Thank you very much for all participants, and thank you for allowing us to raising our voice from Turkey specific to earthquake aftermath, the earthquake conditions. So we are also believing and sharing the same wishes with the same motivation for rebuilding to Syria for the best interest of the citizens and refugees. So it is same what we are doing in Turkey for refugees from Syrian and non-Syrian countries. So again, thank you very much for listening us, and we are waiting for your kind contributions for all partners.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our attendees, and thank you for the questions. And most importantly, thank you for the forum for hosting us in this very important conversation. I think we need to keep both Syria and Turkey in the conversation. I think people need to continue to have a better understanding of the realities on the ground. I want to encourage anybody who has any questions about sanctions, about need, about impact, to reach out to the forum, and they can direct their questions to any of the panelists who have an immense amount of information that couldn't be covered during such a short span of time. Nala, I want to thank you for being the co-host and facilitating this and for this opportunity. Thank you, everyone.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. And these are exactly the kinds of conversations that I feel we need to highlight. You know, Barbara Leopold, one of the attendees, made a comment before she had to sign off, basically saying that in terms of the media outside of our region, these are just not the stories that people are hearing. And I think, you know, this is very obviously kind of echoed in what Fadi was saying, what Wafat was saying about, you know, the fact that this is such a highly politicized situation, and people tend to forget the fact that there's a huge humanitarian crisis at hand, and that the politics shouldn't play a part in it, but are actually very much leading, you know, a leading factor in why we don't have these stories out in the open. And I think, you know, just to clarify a little bit of why I keep pushing the question around what are Arab philanthropists doing beyond ODA, beyond what is officially kind of required, or is that this is part of what our forum is intended to do, which is really to help Arab philanthropy be more strategic and be more accountable, frankly, in a way. And so, you know, what other than, you know, gross humanitarian crises are tests for when we are strategic and when we are transparent and when we are accountable. And I think that, you know, this is why for us it was so important and critical to co-host a conversation like this. And I hope that we'll continue to do that and to ask questions that are a little bit probing and maybe a little bit uncomfortable, because, you know, I mean, again, hearing every one of these panelists talk about how it's difficult to be optimistic, it's difficult to be hopeful, but still kind of pushing through is the reality. And so I don't want it to be a rainbow sort of, you know, everything is lovely, when the reality is that's not the case. And it's important that we are honest about that. So I'm very grateful for all of you, for being honest, for being open, also for being hopeful, frankly, because that's, you know, that's much needed. And I think that, you know, we'll kind of do a quick roundup of the key messages that we take away from all this information that you've given us. And for me, it really echoes so much of what we're seeing in the region, in the sector anyway, you know, the need for flexible funding, the need for non-politicized support, and the need for kind of amplifying the voices of the people on the ground, right? So bringing it back to a kind of more local expertise and local information. So thank you all very much for bringing your expertise to this table. And thank you, Yasmin, for a wonderful moderation. And we're so pleased with this outcome. So I thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye bye.